I'm the deputy director of the Washington office of the National Council of Resistance of Iran. You know, the National Council of Resistance is actually the parliament in exile. It's headquartered in Paris, but it has offices, different places. Like, you know, we're here. I'm right now at the DC office. We're right across from the White House, 1747 Pennsylvania Avenue, just a block away. And then, and it has a large presence also inside Iran and, you know, doing activities against the regime, you know, acting as engine during the protests. This is the movement that exposed all the major nuclear sites of Iran and all of that. And it's headed by a woman, interestingly.
Oh, yes. I've watched many videos of hers. And it was funny. There was somebody else that I was looking at that when I was watching videos of her, then I started seeing videos of who? Okay, by the way, her name is Maryam Rajavi, right?
Maryam Rajavi.
Rajavi. Okay.
Yes.
Great.
And she is the number one target of Tehran. She is hated by the mullahs because she undermines their ideology, you know, their ideology of Islamic extremism, Islamic, you know, it's really fascism cloaked under the cover of religion.
I call it Islamofascism.
Yes, and the Mrs. Rajavi says, no, you don't represent the people, because 98% of the Iranian population are Muslim, but they're vehemently opposed to the mullahs. He says, you know, you have taken hostage our religion, you have taken hostage our country, you have taken hostage our culture, everything, and you don't belong. And not only that, because, you know, the ideology of Islamic fundamentalism is built on misogyny. That if you go to the core of that ideology, of course, you know, there's terrorism, there's violence, all of those things, but even worse than all of that is misogyny. And it's the misogyny that is the driving force behind all of those things. And Mrs. Rajavi, she represents exactly the opposite. He says women can, you know, not only can be free, but they can lead the society. Where is the leadership of women in the society? It's not about, you know, just a choice of what to wear, not to wear. That's like the very foundational thing. On top of it, where are their political rights? The right to, you know, having the leadership role in the society. Where are the rights to determine the future of a nation, playing the role? You know, that in Iran, there is not even one single female judge, not one. Why? Because it's prohibited under the laws of the mullahs that you cannot be a judge if you're a female. Imagine a country of 86 million, and, you know, they can't even make a decision. They can, like, you know, that's how retrogressive, that's how reactionary, backward that mentality is. And that's why, you know, Mrs. Rajavi is just exactly the opposite. And she is being attacked by the mullahs. Like, the biggest campaign of misinformation by the Iran regime is run against her. You know, they're describing her, everything the mullahs are. They call her terrorist, terror cult, you know, cult leader. She's communist, she's Marxist. Anything you can think of, she's been attacked, and she's standing like firm and just saying, we're going to overthrow you. And, you know, the mullahs are going to go down. And, you know, none of those things are true. But why are they doing it? Because they're so afraid. Those mullahs on their last leg, they are so isolated. They're rejected by their own population. The whole region is actually waking up, understanding what the mullahs are all about. They are the head of the snake of war and terror, period,
You know,
in the whole region.
when you look back at the history since 79, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, I started seeing statements that there is a renewal or revival in Iran, and that we're close to bringing the mullahs down. And I wonder, and that's so understandable because when you're in a resistance movement, um, usually I would think that there are ebbs and flows of energy and of success, right? Um, and so you would have the same thing in Iran. And I know that there is great resistance to the regime. Uh, but I wonder how optimistic we can be today when we've been optimistic, or I've seen Iranians be optimistic for years. Like, this is it. The revival's here. The resistance is strong. We're going to make this happen. I don't want to, I'm hoping for the resistance, any of the resistance movements and all to be successful. Nevertheless, I wonder, are we really closer today? And why are we, if that is so?
That's a great question, Elizabeth. And, hope is one thing, but how you're going to do it is not to understand the Iranian society and Iranian population. We have gone through, as you said, ups and downs. We've seen a lot of things in our history. Iran is a nation state, unlike many, in the region. And we have, very educated population. And the one thing they don't tolerate is dictatorship. The 1979 revolution was actually a genuine revolution that people want to change because they were fed up with the Shah Sabak, the secret police he had. And he appeared on television just about 4 years before his fall, and he dissolved all of the political parties. He said there's only one single party in Iran, and that's my party. And you either become a member of that party or you go to jail. The notorious Evin prison that everyone talks about today was built under the Shah. He was so corrupt. Iran was a rich country, but he was so boasting that, oh, I have the United States on my side, which is good. But if you don't have the people on your side, even the United States cannot help you. And
Well, let me
Shah had the
ask you
military
about
might.
that.
Yes.
Um, I think that the Shah was doing some things. I completely concur about the Shabak, about the secret police, about those corruptions, dissolving other parties. I mean, that is a heinous thing. They were moving dramatically toward a modernization. And we look, all of us, at those videos that are on X. They're so adorable. These videos from the 70s when women were free and they would be carrying their books to school or on a beach or wearing some very pretty hairdo and dress. And it makes us nostalgic and hopeful that the Iranian people can someday have a more Western state or nation again. So I guess my point would be that would you be keeping some of the, if the resistance is successful, would you want the modernization to continue that he did legitimately bring about? And maybe you would fill me in on your disagreements with any part of that, and have it truly a free society, because you bring up that he dissolved or banned parties. But I wonder, will MEK, Mujahideen al-Khalq, is it Khalq with the LK at the end?
Kal means people.
Yeah,
Kal,
people. Khalq.
Kal is a Farsi name for people.
Right. So the Mujahideen al-Khalq, will you insist upon a multi-party state? Will you truly be democratic?
Oh, absolutely. The fact that the mullahs have done so much horrible things, not just on women, against anybody. Talk to anybody in the country, they tell you how horrible the mullahs are. Okay,
I think the whole world knows that.
The whole,
Yeah.
I hope so.
I don't think you have to
Honestly
convince
speaking,
my audience about mullahs
yeah,
bad.
your audience different, but I mean, honestly speaking, we had a policy of appeasement here in this country, in Europe. They were saying, oh, how Khatami, for instance, was a moderate. this mullah, is smiling. He's a moderate.
That's
That mullah is
ridiculous.
wearing like a white turban. He's moderate. Christian Amanpour on CNN was praising,
Okay, but
uh,
Christian Amanpour is so far away from anything that I would agree to anyone in my audience at WorldNetDaily or Rumble.
yes,
So, specific instances for historical context, I think is important. But trust me, normal people who love liberty and normal Americans know the the regime in Iran today is the height of evil. So let's talk about
let me answer your question
yes.
before
Mhm.
you start. I think you asked a very important question. Definitely, we believe that, our leader, Mrs. Rajavi, has said repeatedly, our goal is not to take over power and replace the mullahs with ourselves. No, our goal is to let the people of Iran to elect their elected representatives. And he has introduced a 10-point platform for the future of Iran, which is very popular as a bipartisan support in the House and the Senate. At that platform, the number one element in that platform is that the sole criteria for legitimacy in the future of Iran will be the ballot box. Unlike the mullahs that say, oh, we get our authority from God, who elected Khamenei? Nobody. Or the Shah who said, I'm here, I'm the king, you follow me. And, where did he come from? His father came to power by coup d'etat. I mean, that's all out. It has to be ballot box. Second, she talks about the separation of religion and state. And even though 98% of the population in Iran are Muslims, but they would have no advantage whatsoever, or anybody else be in disadvantage. Even under the Shah, there was an official religion for the country. It was Islam. Mrs. Rajavi said, no,
Was
none
the
of that.
Shah Sunni or Shia?
He was Shia, but he was in cahoots with the mullahs. And if you want to know how the mullahs came to power, ask the Shah. He suppressed intellectuals, the younger people, the modern nationalist elements, put them in jail under different pretexts. Oh, I'm fighting communism and all. Those guys were not communists. They were intellectuals who wanted political freedoms. And he left the mosque operating very openly, and he actually gave them a lot of funding. And he sold it to the West that, the clergy is good because they're anti-communism. And at that time, if you recall, in those years, communism was a big thing. And so he sold it to the West that the reason, he liked the mullahs because they were praising him. Every mosque they would go, they were praising the Shah, and he loved it. And then when the time came, the mullahs had no role in the revolution. Khomeini, until 4 months before the victory of the revolution, he was in Iraq, in Najaf, doing nothing. And it was only in October of 78, he moved from Najaf in Iraq to Paris, near Paris, Neufchâteau. And by February 79, within 4 months, he stole the leadership of a movement that had nothing to do with it. And the reason he managed to do it, because the network of the mosque were left intact by the Shah, and everybody else was either in jail or killed. All of the leaders of the MEK were executed by the Shah or in jail. So when the time came, it was only the mullahs who were, and of course nobody knew exactly.
Firstly, the MEK was created years before, in the 60s. I don't know, 65,
65.
yeah, something like. And then the Iranian Revolution came about in 79 with the takeover of the U.S. Embassy. And as far as I understand it, the mullahs were working with MEK at that time. And then the mullahs, including the, you can correct me, then the imams, imams, essentially executed many of your people, put them in prison because, I guess joining hands with Islamic extremists, if you want to call them that, is never a safe alternative. That's the story. I know there are at least two narratives that are out there about MEK and that early history. One is that MEK, you could say from liberal to socialist to Marxist. I hear exactly the opposite declarations made. That's very frustrating to me. It's kind of like, Ukraine and Russia. It's like you never feel like you're ever going to get to the bottom of the last fact. And I like to keep an open mind, but I don't like to be an idiot. And so, that's my high standard. I don't want to be an idiot or a dupe. So my point is the standard narrative, and you could say that was from the Shah, you could say that was from the mullahs, the Ayatollah's party, or misguided people, and say, no, that's not the case. You let me know what you think, but I'll just reiterate. In the 60s, there's the MEK, that the MEK, this is the narrative that I'm asking you to counter if you should, was partnering with the revolution that was also being run by the mullahs, the mosques, and that after the fact, that everybody thought that there was going to be a multi-party, maybe a cooperative or coalition kind of government, and then MEK got tossed, thrown in prison. Of course, we know about the 30,000 that were executed at one time, which was insane. But you're saying you've never been Marxist, that the organization has never been Marxist or socialist?
You see, the MEK from day one, they were always, it was founded by three very young university students who were really brilliant students. You look at all of the founders, the original members of the MEK, they came from the elite, the intellectuals who believed that they were Muslims, and they studied all of the different political thinkings. They were thinking that, we need to bring about change in the country. And that change requires leadership, it requires organization. And they never believed in Marxism, even though in those years, Marxism was like huge.
It was very popular in the Middle East, too.
It was everywhere, from Latin America. I mean, if there were any movements that were, any kind of like liberation movements, whatever, whether you like it or you didn't like it, it was driven by Marxism or communism, either Soviet Union or China. In the case of Iran, and the MEK said none of that is a solution for Iran. We need to get to the roots of our nationalism, because they were followers of Dr. Mossadegh, prime minister, the nationalist prime minister who nationalized oil. And they opposed the Shah's dictatorship just because the way that the Shah was running the show, and Shah arrested almost the entire leadership of the MEK, put them in jail. And then in jail, they couldn't really label the MEK anything. So the Shah came up and coined a contradictory term, Islamic Marxist. How can you be Muslim at the same time, believing in God, and at the same time be a communist or Marxist?
I'll tell you how. Let me give you one historical example. And you'll know this very well. In Egypt, in the Palestinian Arabs, or the Arabs in Palestine, post-statehood of Israel, there was a lot of flirting, with Nazi Germany, of course, but also with communism and Russia or the Soviet Union. And one could say that that is merely a front so that it could look secular and not an Islamic extremist organization or sectarian. Or one could say that it is a misguided attempt to merge Sharia and Allah with Marxism, which you're right, that does not work. But so there were experiments, and either it was insincere and affront for Western audiences, and maybe getting help from the Soviet Union, etc., or it was a sincere attempt. But it has been attempted, has it not?
I'm sure there are people in different parts of the world who may want to do all kinds of things. But in the case of Iran, the Marxists were actually represented by the Tudeh Party, which was the mouthpiece of the Soviet Union at the time. And they were just acting on behalf of the Soviets, and they were vehemently opposed to the MEK or anybody else. The
What are they
MEK was
called?
born at, it was the Tudeh Party, Tudeh, Tudeh, yeah, Tudeh. To the party, and it was if you look up, it was the mouthpiece of the Soviets. That's all. And the MEK, I mean, they were not doing a PR stunt or anything like that. These were very sincere people, and you can fool people for a period, but if you have a history of like 60 years of standing up against two dictatorships, and staying on message, saying the same thing today as you were saying in the early days about political freedoms, about separation of religion and state, about women leadership. Which Marxist movement do you know that women are leading? or Islamist movement that you know that women are in the leadership, not in a superficial way, but, a generation of them leading the fight against the mullahs. The 1988 massacre, it was based on a fatwa, a handwritten religious decree issued by Khomeini, it's a very short, brief, handwritten message. He said in that fatwa that anyone who is in any way associated with the MEK must be killed. Why? Because they say that they are Muslims, but in their heart, they are hypocrites. They use the term hypocrites. Therefore, hypocrite means like munafiqin, means hypocrites. So they need to be executed. And the only people they could catch were the prisoners, political prisoners. So they brought in a matter of 4 months, and this is a known fact that it's been investigated by you, and you know about that. And they brought every single prisoner and asked them one question: what's your position about the Mujahideen Al? And if they said anything that was even closely tangentially supportive of the MEK, they would send them. That's it. They would send them down the hallway towards the right that would lead to the execution halls, kill them right away. And the girls, as young as 13 or 14, 15 were killed just because of their beliefs. It's not because none of them were sentenced to death anyway. All of those political prisoners that were serving their term, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, they just got them and killed them. Why did Khomeini do that? Because he felt this is the movement that is so appealing for the population. They are making sense. These are intellectuals who talk to people, unlike the mullahs who just say nonsense. And none of the younger generation could relate to the mullahs. And these young people, educated people, are talking all about freedom. The biggest divide in Iran was about political freedoms. The MEK, along with a number of others, that were saying the number one problem of our society is the lack of political freedoms. Khomeini and all the others, some of the Marxists actually, to the party, were collaborating with Khomeini, saying no, the biggest problem in the country is the United States. We need to fight the United States imperialism, okay? We need to fight the United States. And under the banner of fighting the United States, they were actually empowering the Revolutionary Guards, empowering the mullahs. And that's how they got rid of the MEK. And the MEK had a very, very difficult situation in order to make the argument for the population that these mullahs are the enemies. And, and though in the early days, it was extremely difficult because Khomeini had all the popular support. He took advantage of the animosity that existed against the Shah. He's a holy man, and he's just coming from the mosque.
Oh, yeah,
and all
I can
this.
see that because much animosity, because big problems, obviously, with the Savak, a secret police that's arresting
Exactly.
people. So that I completely understand. And so using the Shah and the Savak as a foil will bring at least an initial support of an alternative revolutionary force, which supposedly the Ayatollah was, and his imams. Um, and then the same could be true now for all of um, the resistance movements in Iran and outside of Iran, in exile, if you will, that they look, all of them, really good compared to the regime. So
Exactly. I mean, that's an important thing, because the standard should not be the regime, because
no,
the regime, anyone, bring any dictatorship anywhere in the world, and compared to the mullahs, they look pale, okay? They
yeah,
look like forest boys.
mhm.
So if you want to compare, with our culture, our history, democracy. You look at the future. No nation is going to overthrow one dictatorship only to knowingly choose another form of dictatorship.
And
Once they were
that,
beguiled by the mullahs,
well,
but they're not
and
going to
that
be
can
beguiled
happen.
anymore.
It's happened before. So
Yes.
so that is the warning. And of course, I'm sure y'all have been thinking about these things for a long time. Um, I still wonder, are you Shia or Sunni?
I'm Shia, yeah, and over 90% of the Muslims in Iran are Shia, but the biggest enemy of the mullahs are also Shia, because the MEK, they are the main victim of the mullahs. It's not about Shia or Sunni. It's not even about the religion. The fight in Iran is about those who want to see freedom, and against those who want to maintain dictatorship, maintain fascism
No, I
under
get
the
that.
cover of religion.
I get that. So you're saying that there are many Shia, of course, that are supporting the resistance because they can be Shia but still not want to live under the autocratic totalitarian government of this Iranian regime. Um,
Absolutely, you're correct.
but what I would
The
like,
vast majority.
well, what I would,
Yes.
it's hard when you're having a conversation. If you were here over the dinner table, we would just be going and
Yeah.
interrupting each other all the time. So,
Yes.
but um, you know that we have a problem with Islam in the West, right? I mean, I speak this as in a cordial, friendly, loving way, loving way. I'm not attacking Shia Islam or Islam. Uh, I don't believe the same things that Islam
Yes.
teaches. I don't believe in the Quran.
Obviously.
Okay, so that's just a fact, and I'm very committed. I've come to the conclusion that with the way things are going in the world, that unless we're willing to start talking openly, cordially, about our differences with religion, our political differences, and talk about things that are supposed to be taboo, but if we do so in a brotherly way or humane way, um, that is only going to benefit us. So I don't believe in Islam. Okay, I'm saying that because I want to be able to. I want to open this up. You don't believe in my faith. That's okay. You can say something like that. But what I'm saying is this: that around the world, we are being shown, as you probably are following what's happening in the UK, what's happening in France, and all over Europe. Um, I want to hear what you have to say, but about that, and tell me what your approach should be in Iran to the problems that we all share when the West is under attack. That's one thing. And number two, we are told that in the Quran, and I have many Qurans sitting around here. I always say that and I can never find them, but they're over by my couch. That in the Quran, and the Hadith, Sunnah, whatever, that democracy is anathema to Islam. Are you going to be able to placate those in your country that say, look, Islam requires a caliph or, a different word for it in maybe Shia Islam. Tell me which is hard question. Go with it.
No, that's a great question, and I'm very full agreement with you. We need to really look at the things, not just on the surface. Okay, and people around the world have different faith. That's all respected. That's fine. People have different religions. I don't know how many religions in the world exist, but there are many, many, and no one is trying to convince one over the other.
Well, yeah, there
And
are, but in this conversation, that's not the purpose of our
right,
conversation.
exactly. But my point is that in 1991, I was just looking around to find the book. We published a book called Islamic Fundamentalism: The New Global Threat. Okay, Islamic Fundamentalism: The New Global Threat. And before the show starts, I'm going to grab. I hope I have it in here. I'll show you the book. And at that time, we made the argument that after the fall of the Soviet Union, the new threat that is emerging is Islamic fundamentalism. And everyone was pretty much laughing at, what are you talking
That was
about?
in
What does it
91?
mean? 1991. I remember, I had a few copies and sent it out. And I remember Daniel Pipes called me and he said, I just received this book you guys published. And let me be very honest with you. I was so hostile to you guys. Okay? I thought you guys were terrible. But when I saw this book, I don't talk to you because I think I had a totally wrong ending of you guys. Okay. And he, so he was
That's
in,
a pretty impressive endorsement.
and he came and he went to Paris, met with Mrs. Rajavi, saying that, up until today, I thought that, you and I are us were on two sides of the table. But I understand that, we're on the same boat. Okay. And the argument we made was that, and I remember even before the book came out, I was invited to the National War College in, it was 1990, to speak before, they had different courses, as the Fort McNair right here, National War College. And one of the professors is now dead, Professor Bard O'Neill. He asked me to talk about, we see some emergence of Islamic movements and things like that here and there. Can you address that? And of course, I made a presentation there that eventually became turned a year later to that book. Okay, I didn't author the book, but the book was authored by Mr. Muhaddisin. But that's how the whole thing started. The argument we made was that after the 1979 revolution, that a genuine revolution by the people who wanted democracy and freedom was stolen by the clerics, who very rapidly suppressed anyone who opposed them. And vast majority of them were obviously Muslims because that's the population is, and dominated the thing. And the regime built this whole thing based on expansion and what they call export of revolution. Export of revolution meant nothing but exporting that ideology, recruiting people that would carry the ball for the mullahs. And they started, in Algeria many years ago. And look, they started working in Lebanon. Lebanon wasn't like this before. I mean, go back 4 or 5 decades ago, it wasn't like this. Look at all of these. A lot of those Muslim nations were not like that. What the mullahs did, they turned even a number of benign, ideological sects that existed, different factions of Islam, they turned them into very violent, anti-American.
Which sects are you talking about?
Well, you know the whole history of the Muslim Brotherhood and the Salvation Front in Algeria, for instance. Abbas Madani predated Khomeini, but he wasn't the kind of Abbas Madani he later became. Okay, he was just doing things for themselves, and who cared? It didn't really matter. It didn't really. But Khomeini turned Abbas Madani into an anti-American force that almost overthrew the Algerian government, you know, it was in the 80s. And a lot of the other groups that existed there, where did the mullahs actually recruit all of these fighters for them? If you go back to some of their history, their families, and all, they were like ordinary people, suddenly turned into like, you know, you just can't believe how a human being could become an extremely anti-human person that starts killing, innocent people and justifying it under the religion.
Well, let me ask you about the Muslim Brotherhood, because as I understand it, because obviously the Muslim Brotherhood was founded many, many years, actually decades before the Iranian Revolution and MEK. And the Muslim Brotherhood, one of their greatest writers, and I will admit, I can't remember his name. I could probably search it out. But one of their greatest writers went to Iran, or his book, perhaps, was translated into Farsi. And as I understand it, and that it was studied and it was adopted. Do you know anything about that? Because I wish I had brought his name up before.
Right. No. My point is that there were a lot of these, extremist groups before that predated Khomeini, but they had very little impact. You know, you can have people say, "Oh, our religion is the best in the world," and they're against this group, that group. That's fine, but when you turn them into a political force, into a weapon, that's a totally different thing. You see, that's why that's what we're talking about. Look at the Houthis, for instance. Okay, I mean, Houthi in year 2000, Badruddin al-Houthi, two sons, Hussein and Abdul Muttalib, went to Iran in year 2000. Okay,
2000.
And they went to Qum, right, in Qum. And they spent a year in Qum. You had never heard about the Houthis. There were no such a movement there at the time. And no one really took anything seriously. And then after a year, they went back to Yemen, and they started in the political process there. And they're not even Shia, okay? They have their own sect. I don't know exactly what it is. And then they started the political process in the parliamentary elections. They formed a party. And then they created the organization that now became the Houthis,
mm-hmm.
right? And then Ansarullah, and then one of them, his son Hussein, was killed, and then the father died, and now the Abdul Muttalib Houthi is now the leader. Now they became like,
okay. So what you're
like
saying
Hezbollah.
is that from Yemen, I'm sorry, what was his full name? The leader?
Al-Houthi is the last name.
Al-Houthi.
And the first name, Al-Houthi is the last name.
Yes,
And that's why they call them Houthis.
Right.
And the father, Abdul Muttalib.
Abdul Muttalib. Al-Houthi. Okay, so we'll just go with Mr. Al-Houthi. Anyway, Mr. Al-Houthi
just say
goes
Al-Houthi,
to
the father
Iran.
and the two sons.
Okay,
right.
So the father and the two sons, they hook up intellectually, ideologically with Iran, and the result is what we see today: the hundreds of thousands of starving, dead,
right.
Yemeni children, the war with Saudi Arabia, the attack on Israel and the Gulf, transport in the Gulf.
Now, my point is that what Hezbollah, the Ayatollahs created Hezbollah in Lebanon, okay? Everyone knows Hezbollah now because, they've been around for a while and they've seen their action.
But you're missing my point a little bit. You're missing my point a little. Let me go back to my original. I could sit here and talk about each one of these things for a half an hour. We could have like an 8-hour thing because I love to talk about this stuff. And figure it out.
You're so good. You're so knowledgeable. You've done your own research.
I'm not. I just read books and things. But anyway, So the real question I'm asking is not, gee, has Iran affected the Middle East negatively because it's radicalized or created radical organizations that, such as Hezbollah or Hamas or
Houthis,
Houthis
the
or
Shia militias
and
in Iraq. Yes.
exactly the Iraqi militias. I don't know what's going on with Syria, but my question is that we are told, and I study. When I say study, please don't take me to think that I'm an expert at anything about Islamic history in the sense of um, I haven't read 400 books and that kind of thing, but I've read a lot. I've studied it at a respectable amount. And as far as I can see it from the very beginning, with the Islamic conquest of, wow, all the way over to Morocco, all the way over to India, and going up into Spain, up towards France, and even Ukraine, a couple of miles from Kiev, that Islam always has had, always, a single leader. Now, they may have multiple empires that one takes over the other, but there's always, now that's ancient, so democracy was hardly a thing that was a reality then.
One thing I want to say, Elizabeth, and I really appreciate your trying to get into the depth of things, is that we always differentiate between Islamic fundamentalism and Islam, because not because of the intellectual discussions, because if you don't, then the regime in Tehran benefits from it, because they want to say, we are Islam, okay? Everything else around the world is us. It's just the real Islam. Those who oppose us are not Muslim, like us.
Mm-hmm.
They don't call us Muslim. They call us munafiqin, hypocrite. Okay?
Oh yeah, I've heard.
So if we agree that the mullah, what's really happening is all about religion, this is the biggest help the mullahs will get, and you don't want to do that. Now
Well,
you want to do it
no.
intellectually,
I
right?
agree.
And that's fine.
There's
but
a
when
wide.
when I get on,
Go ahead.
yes, when I get on, I've never discussed the issue of religion.
Do you know why?
Because it's a, yes,
Do you know why?
it's a side thing, because all the thing we talk about is that how the regime is misusing, it's actually fascism cloaked under the name of religion. That's what I always talk about, and don't allow the mullahs get a free ride out of it. And I know there are a lot of people who don't agree with us and they look at things differently. That's fine. But we never do that. And that's why we put out that book saying Islamic fundamentalism.
I understand
not
very
Islam.
well. Listen, let me just throw something in here. The reason why it's not talked about is because, and that is why I literally make this statement. I'm not Muslim. I don't agree with it. I'm Christian or Judeo-Christian, and you don't agree with my religion. We can talk about this and not pretend that we don't have some disagreements. I think that's so important. If we can't just talk about things instead of being in, say, the UK, where you can't talk about religion or you'll get thrown in jail, that's a bad thing. It's not good for any society. So I don't want to go any direction where it's going to hurt the resistance to this despotic regime. At the same time, I want to ask questions about things like I mentioned, and I'm not saying you're not Muslim. I disagree with the Khamenei, but I'm asking, is democracy and the rule of law that maybe is not wholly Shia or not Shia, or maybe a mixture because different states do different things, is it compatible with democracy? Is Islam
Absolutely
compatible with it? And you're thinking
Yes.
that it is.
Well, our thinking is that, that's why Mrs. Rajvi, she's a Muslim, she's a very devout, committed Muslim. She, observes religion, but she's extremely tolerant and very democratic about it. He introduced there is a ratification within NCRL about the relationship between religion and all of the religions, saying that basically in the future of Iran, no religion will have any preference nor being discriminated against. And there has to be a separation between religion and state. And that's why we have tremendous support among Christians, the Jewish people, non-believers. We don't judge people based on their religion or their lack of religion. We look at them as human beings first and foremost.
And Iranians, right? That's the key, because you are a nation, a state, a country, and if you're going to have democracy with minority religions and cultures or ethnicities in your culture, that's a tough thing. That's a tough row to hoe. And I appreciate that your attempt or your commitment to do that. Now, she wears a hijab, and all of your in the camp in Albania, all the women wear hijab. It's obviously a required dress code. One of the greatest questions that I would have for the Iranian women who have been imprisoned and executed for taking their hijabs off is the MEK going to insist on hijabs?
Absolutely not. I mean, the main slogan and the main principle that Mrs. Rajavi has had has been the women have to be free to choose their way of dressing, have to be free about, their social activities. There is a plan within the NCRR on the issue of women that is very, very specific on the issue of clothing. He was actually, right after the revolution, when the regime imposed the mandatory hijab, there was a big demonstration by women organized just a couple months after the revolution.
I can imagine.
And who was one of the main leaders of that protest?
Who?
Mrs. Rajavi.
Mrs. Rajavi. Well,
yeah.
So she
and
wears...
She wears a scarf, but she is defending those who choose not to wear a scarf.
Okay.
See?
But everyone in the MEK, all the women in the MEK wear scarves.
Their religion,
I'm not putting it down. That's a religion.
Right.
Okay.
No, I'm saying, but MEK is different than the NCRI, okay? In the NCRI, in any organization, they have their own, any religion, you have their certain rules within the religion and all of that.
Right.
That people adopt that. And, whether they, when it comes to a coalition that she leads, when we talk about the country, a nation, you don't decide for others